So I am going to spend some time today walking you through the FDA's website, how to navigate Regulations.gov, how to view other comments that have already been submitted, and then I will end the webinar before questions with giving you a preview of what ASA is going to submit for regulatory comments. So we will get started by first looking at Regulations.gov. And right now I'm sharing this landing page with all of you. So you can see sort of how this platform looks. When you navigate to Regulations.gov, it is the comprehensive collection of every federal agency's call for regulations. So chances are many of these are not going to typically be relevant to what we do at Americans for Safe Access. Right here you can see that there is an endangered and threatened wildlife of the gray wolf. Certainly something important to comment on, but not what we focus on here. So to navigate to the FDA's scientific call for information page, I've searched both for cannabidiol and CBD. Cannabidiol seems to be the easiest way to find it in terms of how indexing comes up. So we'll just put that in as our search term. And the way the FDA and Regulations.gov indexes calls for comments generally, they do it by closing date. So you can see right here, these top two comments are the ones that are still open. But because this citizen petition that contains the search term cannabidiol closes May 29th, it actually comes up first before the one we're interested in. So the one we're interested in is scientific data and information related to products containing cannabis, cannabis-derived compounds for the public hearing and request for comments. So we're going to click this link, and this brings us to the information that is the posting notice. It tells you all of the details in terms of technical information, how to submit comments, and then the content of the comment themselves. So right now, the FDA has said that through July 2nd, they will be accepting comments, although the public hearing on this issue is May 31st. Americans for Safe Access will be at that public hearing. We were one of the 150 panelists from around the country to be selected to testify. So we will be there sharing our detailed comments and sharing our plan and pathway forward for this potential regulations that may come from the FDA. However, just because the public hearing is happening on May 31st does not mean you have to submit your comments by then. You may find it beneficial to listen to the public hearing and take in what is being said there before submitting your own comment. But that's certainly not something you have to do. If you want to submit something in the next week or so, that is fine as well. So I want to highlight a few things on this page. The first is this link right here where it says view original printed format. I always click on this link just to be sure that the notice hasn't changed because when you click on the PDF format, this is the notice that's published in the actual Federal Register. So I just always click this to make sure that there is no discrepancy between what's posted on the comment webpage and what's published as the actual legal document. So the notice that we'll be commenting on is right here. It's under Department of Health and Human Services, Food and Drug Administration. It lists the code number and then the docket number for this particular regulation. And this docket number is really important when you are submitting a comment, particularly if you're going to hand write one or use a PDF attachment. It's really important to include this comment number as part of your comment. So we have a blog up on our website that's basically step one of what to do. No matter what you're going to say, you're going to want to include this comment number just in case for whatever reason it gets sorted in a strange way. This is how the FDA will index the comments for this notice. So I want to go back to the web page and highlight a few other things. Before you submit your own comment, I highly recommend that you read through the entire notice. It is a lot, it is very dense, but it will give you a good idea of what exactly the FDA is looking for. Unfortunately, with this call for comments, the FDA is not necessarily looking for personal stories or how CBD or THC has personally improved your life. They're looking for data, they're looking for well-published information, and the personal stories that we tell on Capitol Hill may not get us as far in this comment process as, say, scientific information or direct references to state laws might. So the FDA is posing a number of questions. It's 15 in total when you're looking at subparts. And the first category right here is health and safety risks. So as you can see, the questions that the FDA is asking are very particular and very concise. The first one they asked is based on what is known about the safety of products containing cannabis and cannabis-derived compounds. Are there particular safety concerns that FDA should consider regarding its regulatory oversight and monitoring of these products? And then it gives some examples of what it means by this question. It includes things like what levels of cannabis and cannabis-derived compounds cause safety concerns. How does the mode of delivery affect the safety and exposure to cannabis and cannabis-derived compounds? So as you can see, these questions are hyper-specialized and very specific. And the FDA is looking, it almost seems like, for numbers and facts and patterns that I think sort of trend a little bit away from our traditional advocacy. You look at another question for the FDA, and in Part B is manufacturing and product quality. And the first question there is, are there particular standards needed to address any safety issues related to manufacturing, processing, and holding of products containing cannabis and cannabis-derived compounds? Genotoxic impurities, degradation of active compounds. So this would be a great opportunity if you work with a laboratory or work with producing certificates of analysis or things that very clearly go through the process of testing and labeling. It would be great to include information like that in a comment answering these questions. So the final category that the FDA is looking for comments in is marketing, labeling, and sales. What the FDA is looking for here, based on other comments they've called for in the past, is basically how they're going to structure their warning and labeling system. Whether this is on the product itself, at the point of sale, or some other method like you see with the foldouts from some other prescriptions. So below that, the FDA lists all of the statutes and laws that give it authority to submit these comments. You see the Food, Drugs, and Cosmetics Act. Several times the FDA's designation of generally recognized as safe. You see some information about animal food and drugs, cosmetics, and then as well as regulations that deal with medical devices and tobacco products. So the legal authorities themselves aren't that critical to review. It's mainly the questions that the FDA is looking for. So before submitting your comment as the second step, I highly encourage everyone to read comments that have already been submitted. You can see over here on the right of your screen that it says comments and comments received. That number is as of midnight Eastern time last night, so any comments that are going to be received today won't be included till tomorrow. And then when the notice closes on July 2nd, any comments submitted on the last day won't be included on this page until July 3rd. So to look at comments that have been already submitted, you go down to related comments and click all. And this will show you all the comments that have been submitted so far. And it will determine whether or not the comment has been submitted anonymously or by someone who's chosen to identify themselves, and it will show whether or not the comment has an attachment or if it's just made through the commenting form. So we'll look at this first run right here. It's a comment from Anonymous. It's very brief. Out of 3 different CBD oils I have tried, the Warfighter CBD 1500 full spectrum was the most effective for my pain. Unfortunately, this comment probably isn't going to have significant impact on the FDA. It doesn't provide any data other than an anecdotal story, and it doesn't provide really what type of pain this person is dealing with, or any sort of the questions that the FDA is looking for in terms of safety profile or labeling. So if we go back, I will try to find a better one that does a little bit better with providing data. So it's not a steadfast rule, but generally those commenters who choose to include attachments at least are providing references or are providing a little bit more detailed information. So if we look at this comment from Ben, we open up his attachment and see that Ben has included some studies as well as some publications about what's going on with the CBD product that he is using. So this is a much more helpful comment in terms of what the FDA is looking for. It doesn't look like it directly answers one of the questions, but just because something doesn't directly answer a question, it still may be very important to include this data and this information in the commenting process. So we'll bring us back to the commenting page. You can go through, and again, some of these are much better than others, but things that we would definitely recommend avoiding is only including a personal story without at least referencing the stories of others, or at least more importantly, or preferred, referencing a study that backs up your claims. Don't attack the FDA. There is a person on the other end of these comments reading them, so putting in disparaging remarks, saying that you have done nothing, well, it may be true. Chances are this person is low on the totem pole at the FDA, and will have to review all these comments before running them up to the commissioner or whoever is ultimately going to be in charge of setting these regulations. So be courteous and be polite in these comments, and then include as much information as you think is relevant and pertinent. And that is a great sort of framework to start the commenting process. So if you want to comment directly through Regulations.gov, there is a button right here at the top right of your screen that says Comment Now. You click that, and it will bring up this web form where you can put in your comments. And the only reason I'm typing this right now is I have a more extensive PDF that I'm going to walk you all through in a moment. But on this page, there's a commenter's checklist. I think that's also important to read. It sort of overviews some of the things I've already mentioned. I do want to highlight one particular point on this notice is that this set right here, it's form letters, and it's what this paragraph is basically saying is that, you know, when we send a letter to all of you that basically says sign on to the comments we've already created, and that submission is sent several times, that doesn't mean that submission will get more weight through the commenting process. I know some organizations, and us included, have sent out letters like that, but the FDA and other agencies have recently clarified that, unfortunately, the commenting process is not just an up or down vote of public opinion. It matters more so on the quality of comments rather than the quantity. So as they say right here, a single well-supported comment may carry more weight than 1,000 form letters. So we really encourage you to take some time with this and really dedicate a couple hours to craft a really well thought out, well-reasoned comment. So back to the comment submission form. It asks for your name. Your name is not required. If you're submitting on behalf of your organization, you can select I'm submitting on behalf of a third party and then put your name and the organization. The platform lets you select a category you're submitting from. I identify ASA as a healthcare association. There's drug associations, but the way that is coded, it is reserved mainly for pharmaceutical companies, and I certainly don't want the FDA to conflate us with one of those. But there's government, individual consumer, and for most of you watching this webinar, you'll fall in the individual consumer category, but choose whichever most appropriately describes the perspective you are commenting from. When you are going through this process, I'm going to do part of it, but not all of it. You'll get a screen on the next screen that allows you to see your comments. I'm actually going to just copy and paste some of ours real quick so I can show you the process. And where did it go? There we go. So I'm just going to copy the intro paragraph to show you what the preview window looks like, and we'll go through the full submission process. We can include that right there and put my name, spinning on a third party. So this is what the preview screen will look like before you actually submit your comment. There is a limit with submitting through this form. You are limited to 5,000 characters. That may be sufficient for the comment you're writing. If you're going to be writing something longer or including lots of reference sources, we recommend uploading a PDF onto this file because it allows you to have much more freedom in terms of how much you can write. So once you've reviewed everything and everything looks like it is the way you want it, you click that you've read and understand their statement, and then you will submit your comment. When you submit your comment, you will get a receipt with a tracking number, so you can see where your comment is moving through this process. I've found in the past this tracking number is only marginally useful. It basically says either your comment has been received or your comment is under review. There's not really any other distinctions beyond that. And the comment under review tracking identification won't become available probably until the 2nd or 3rd week of July after these comments have been submitted. So that's generally how you use this platform. Again, the notice itself is contained both on this page and in that PDF form. So I want to switch to our comments to give you a little bit better idea of what we mean by well-reasoned, well-supported supported comments. So as you can see, we included the docket number. It's switched over. Oh, it hasn't. Okay. I see. Sorry about that, everyone. Hold on. New share. There we go. There we go. Great. So this is a sample of the comments we're going to be submitting. As you can see at the top right here, we included that docket number as well as the full name of the notice, the scientific data and information about products containing cannabis, cannabis-derived compounds, public hearing, request for comments. So the way we've set our comments up, we start with the main category, first health and safety risks, and then we say which question of the FDA we're addressing. So this section is health and safety risks, and we primarily wanted to talk about the external risks, pesticides, heavy metals, other impurities that can be associated with cannabis cultivation. So we start with an intro paragraph. I won't read the whole thing, but I'll leave it on the screen for a moment. And then we go into specific safety concerns that are associated, that the FDA should be concerned of when they are making regulations. So under pesticides, we linked to 3 different notices from Colorado, Oregon, and Washington about notice of recalls for pesticides. So as you can see, these are hyperlinked, but we will also be including printouts of these recalls as appendixes, and we'll be making sure that they are included in our comments both ways. So we highlight a few news articles in here as well, and then ultimately a memo from the Environmental Protection Agency saying that there is no special local needs registration for pesticides for cannabis. After we highlight the problem, we move into a recommendation. So this is a really effective way to structure comments because it not only identifies a problem, but it also provides a solution for these regulators. So in our recommendation, we say Americans for Safe Access urges the FDA to work with EPA to identify and set limits on the types of pesticides that are approved for use in the cultivation of cannabis and hemp, and also establish limits on any residual pesticides that could be present in cannabis, hemp, and flowers. Again, I'm not going to read the whole thing. We'll make this available for everyone who's part of this webinar via our website, but it allows a framework of providing the FDA very clearly identifiable problems and solutions how to solve them. So as you'll notice, we didn't exactly say what these regulations look like. There will almost certainly be another call for comment beyond this call for scientific data and information, where they put out draft regulations available for public comment. When those are issued, we will certainly go line by line and address regulations from a formatting perspective and from a very technical perspective. But the way this call is structured, you don't necessarily need to worry about putting forth regulations in regulations form. They are just looking for suggestions on areas where they need additional oversight. So after pesticides, we look at solvents, and again, we link to some news about recalls related to solvents. I've seen some other comments that specifically list the different classes of solvents and what levels are appropriate. So if this is something that you have experience with or expertise with, it's certainly something that the FDA is looking for in terms of information. We included in our recommendation here about setting limits on the types of solvents that may be used to produce cannabis and hemp. Again, we didn't specifically identify these, but want the FDA to go on an ongoing conversation with interested stakeholders and obviously patients to determine what's going to be the best for developing these regulations. We addressed regulatory oversight of potency of edibles, wanting to make sure that the THC isn't overly limited, but at the same time having a responsible serving in the package. So I didn't pull off any of our comments from some of the other sections, manufacturing and sales, labeling and safety, but this preview should give you a good idea of what types of answers the FDA is looking for. And I will say, if you are aware of a great study or a great news article, that is a great starting point for your comments. And if you can find a way to include a study or that news article in these comments, it would be, I think, tremendously helpful. So I will open it up for questions for anyone who has one. I will say that these comments we are finalizing right now, and they will be publicly available before the hearing on May 31st. So we are happy to share them. We are happy to take a look at comments you're thinking about submitting and providing some feedback. But yeah, we will have these comments up on our website, up on a blog, so that everyone can read our full comments. We expect we're going to have around probably 20 pages worth of comments on this notice. So we're certainly being very thorough and hope that you all will be thorough as well. And then I am going to switch back to the video so I can see anyone's questions.
So something that I'd be interested in is if someone has experience lobbying, talking to staff at in government or talking to representatives, how does this, what are the sort of differences and similarities if someone has that kind of experience to how they're going to format these comments?
Sure. I think there's a lot of parallels between being an effective citizen lobbyist and being effective in the regulatory comment process. I think we start a lot of our citizen lobbying with sharing your story. And I think that's a great place to start. But if you've attended our lobby days or have done one on the state level, sharing your story has to be followed up by really quality information. For our lobby days, we shared stories, but we also had leave-behinds that sort of outlined what our asks were for legislative priorities, outlined research, and really showed these lawmakers that we were serious about the things we were asking for. So I think if you apply that same principle to the comment process, you can be very effective. You can start with your story, saying how you've benefited from cannabis or someone you know has benefited from cannabis, but also show that the story that you're telling is not the only one that's happening. Show that there's research that it helps for the condition you're describing. Show that there has been guidance from a state level on something that interests you. And that's really the crux of what the FDA is looking for. So use your advocacy skills to frame the question and frame the solution, but then use materials, scientific studies, and then state-based information to further along your point.
So if someone's starting from the point of an anecdote, their own experience, can you recommend any resources or anything for them to expand that out into studies?
Sure. I mean, definitely would say start with our website. We have a treasure trove of research buried on our site. If you go to on our top navigation bar, is it showing the website? I'm not sure if it is right now. Sorry. There we go. Now it should be. Yes?
Yep.
Great. If you go to our website and under the medical tab, click resources for medical professionals and researchers. We have information about cannabis safety. We have information about scientific studies. So that's a great place to start. Another great place is PubMed, or some of the scientific journals that regularly publish peer-reviewed studies, clinical studies, and if you have attended a lecture or webinar with a well-respected researcher or scientist, and you want to point towards their presentation, and it may not be publicly available, you can say, in a presentation given by Dr. Russo or Dr. Sulak, they revealed this conclusion, and that is at least a great baseline to refer people to that information.
Jason's wondering if there's a publicly available list of people who are confirmed to be testifying at the meeting on the 31st.
I am not sure if there is a publicly available list. I know that both Heather and I submitted to give comments. I got an email saying that my request to give comments was denied. Heather got an email saying that her request to give comments was accepted. The FDA might have that available. I haven't seen it yet, but we'd be happy to post that along with our blog if that is something that is easily accessible.
Antonio's wondering if there's a difference between submitting your comments before the hearing versus after in terms of where they be considered differently.
No, they won't be considered differently. With the hearing, there was one that was similar that happened at the USDA earlier this spring with hemp regulations and farm bill regulations, and there was no acknowledgement either positively or negatively by the people hosting the panel. Everyone had their opportunity to speak or fill the 5 minutes or submit written questions, and the USDA's response was, "Thank you for your comments. We'll take them under review." So as part of the public commenting process, everything that's submitted through July 2nd that's written, as well as everything that's presented in the in-person testimony, all has to be considered in this rulemaking process. It's the law. The only difference between submitting them before and submitting them after is more or less to see whether or not what's being presented at this panel is things that you agree with or disagree with. If you are pretty firmly rooted in what you want to say and don't think that anything that will be said at this in-person panel will really change your message or change your mind, feel free to submit before. If you think that there might be things that are addressed at the public hearing that either you think are going to be good points that you want to highlight and say, as mentioned in the public hearing by so-and-so, we concur, but there also might be things said at the hearing, by an organization said, they established this standard, we disagree. So I think there's a slight advantage in doing these comments after the public hearing because you'll have more available information. And if you are stuck on where to perhaps start with your comments, that may give you some inspiration, but also that inspiration exists right now with many of the comments that have already been filed.
Lisa is wondering, would you recommend coming up with a comment for each of the categories or questions or not? No, I would not. We are, as an organization, not answering every comment. We are answering the ones that we feel we're best suited to provide an answer for. So many of those come from the health and safety risks, and then the labeling standards through our PFC program. We don't have a lot of information about the manufacturing and sales. It's not what Americans for Safe Access does, but we know that there are going to be other folks who are going to be commenting and commenting well on that. So I would suggest that limit yourself to 4, maybe 5 comments at most, but there's certainly nothing wrong with just answering one of the FDA's questions and that being your comment. The FDA doesn't expect commenters to answer every discrete part of every question in their comments, and I think if you try to do so, it becomes a little bit unwieldy. Does the FDA have any sort of obligation to respond to submitted comments?
Not beyond submitting a tracking number to you. Once they give you the tracking number, they've technically fulfilled their legal duty in terms of response to comments. I would say, though, I encourage everyone to not comment anonymously and include contact information for follow-up. It allows the FDA to get a hold of you a lot easier. I don't know if there's a way, if you comment anonymously, for the FDA to find you. And if you make a really good point and they want to follow up, they would be unable to. So I would recommend including contact information, whether it's through an organization or individual, and whatever you're comfortable including there. I think it's very important to keep the conversation ongoing.
In terms of using your name, do you think it's useful for people to include any of their sort of own biography or credential, or sort of I have this experience, or I do this job, or something like that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely useful to include as part of your comments. The FDA is making this public notice and this call to determine essentially experts in this field, and I know a lot of you listening are in that expert category. So including your own credentials is certainly going to be I think helpful. Including your own story is helpful, and then including why you're commenting is helpful. All of those things are helpful as long as you supplement them with the additional data and the additional information.
Just also wondering, do you think there would be a benefit to using these FDA comments as advocacy tools with like congressional reps in terms of sharing that information with them?
Yeah, I think that most congressional reps are probably only just loosely aware that this comment process is happening. I think if you find good comments or have prepared good comments, and you can bring that to the attention of an elected official saying, hey, the FDA is moving forward with this regulatory process, you need to be passing laws to catch up so those regulations aren't left in no man's land. I think bringing the commenting process to federal officials is helpful, state officials is helpful, because they may want to submit comments themselves, and if they don't, perhaps they should at least be, at minimum, aware that the process is happening and that they'll have to respond to the results of these comments after they're made public.
Just wondering if we included in our comments any information about lab oversight.
We have some information about lab oversight. Heather primarily handled that section, so I can't, in fairness to her, get into full specifics, but we have included some information about lab oversight for sure. And as soon as we are finished finalizing them, we can put those up. And if you think that we are missing some portions on lab oversight, we'd be happy to work with you to either amend our comments or submit a secondary set.
Okay. I think that's all the questions we've got at this point. Did you have any sort of final thoughts or anything?
No, just I encourage everyone who's listening to engage in this commenting process, to share the links that we sent in the chat and this webinar with friends who didn't join. Because although the FDA says that it is not a popularity contest of an up-down vote, the more comments we get behind this issue, the more it has to be paid attention to. I was talking with Sean on staff, and we were looking at some of the other notices for comments, and sometimes these regulations get 20, 30 comments, and they're all from very specific industry lobbyists. We are already at 748. The last call for comments for cannabis received almost 10,000, and that was the international rescheduling determination through the WHO. So it's a very important and relatively easy process to engage in, and the FDA, I think, earnestly wants to develop regulations that are not overly burdensome, that don't harm patients. The FDA's job is not like the DOJ, where it's an enforcement agency in terms of criminal penalties. They're a public health organization, and to date, I know they've done a lot of things that have probably been contrary to public health, but there are a lot of people there who are, I think, earnestly looking at this issue and trying to come out with the best outcomes possible.
Okay.
Well, thanks, everyone. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. And for our veterans who are listening, we will be thinking of you on Memorial Day. Thank you for your service, and thank you for joining this webinar.